This is the first lecture on consonants. First, we're going to talk about broad and narrow transcription. When you're talking about a broad transcription, you're talking about a phonemic transcription. It gives you the information and the contrasted sounds in a language. It does not differentiate allophones, and it uses slashes when you're around the word. When you do a narrow transcription, it is phonetic, and it gives you specific information about how that sound is made. It does include allophones, and it uses brackets instead of slashes. When you're looking at speech sound classifications, you need to look at the four areas: the state of the glottis or the voicing, the state of the velum, is it oral or is it default, place of articulation, and the manner of articulation. That's how you're describing all of the sounds. In your manner of articulation, you have the close approximations, which are the stops, affricates, and fricatives. Or you have the open approximation, which are the liquids, glides, and vowels. I want you to think real quickly about this question. Which of the following is an active articulator? The velum, alveolar ridge, upper lip, tongue tip. So the answer to that is going to be the tongue tip is the active articulator. We're going to talk about the difference between obstruents and sonorants. When you think of obstruents, you think of something that is obstructing the airway. There is some constriction in the vocal tract leading to restricted airflow. They are voiced and voiceless, and those are your oral stops or plosives, your affricates, and your fricatives. When you're talking about sonorants, there's no constriction. It's all voiced: nasal stops, liquids, glides, and vowels. We're going to talk about oral stops. You're looking at the sounds that are p, b, t, d, k. And there are three voiced, voiceless pairs: bilabial, p, b, alveolar, t, d, and velar, which are the k, g. And you have the glottal, which is voiceless, which is not constructive in English, sorry. The production of the stops, there are three stages: the voicing, the closure, and the release. The closing, the active articulator raises to touch the passive articulator. The closure, the articulators are in contact and the air builds up. And then you have the release, which is the active articulator lowers and the air is released. So think about how a k is produced. The back of the tongue rises to the velum during closing. The tongue remains in contact with velum and air builds up behind it during the closure. The tongue is lowered and the air is released. The velum is raised and the vocal folds are not vibrating. In contrast, how is the d produced? The tongue blade rises to the alveolar ridge during closing. The tongue remains in contact with the alveolar ridge and air builds up behind it during closure. The tongue is lowered and the air is released. The velum is raised and the vocal folds are vibrating. So that's the full description of how you produce a consonant. When you're talking about production of stops, the stops can miss the closing and or releasing stages. Homorganic share the same place of articulation. Words like contain, simple, hand, hint, think, ankle, hot dog, big cat. Non-homorganic, different places of articulation, like ducked or wept. When two stops are constructive, the first stop is unreleased. So in a diacritic marking, you can actually see some of the diacritic marks here. In hand and ducked, the n is actually not released in the blend, in the sound blend. N-d. It is not released. Hand. You actually go directly from the n to the d without releasing it. And when you're looking at ducked, it's the same thing. You go from the k to the d, but it is not released. You don't go ducked. You actually don't have a space in between them. It can also occur at the end of words, like sad. So sometimes in our conversational speech, we actually don't release the end consonant. We don't go sad when we're in a conversation. We're going to talk about the aspiration of stops. The aspiration is the burst of air that follows the release of some voiceless stops. The vocal folds are still open and are not vibrating. Voiceless stops occur in words or syllables, initial position before a vowel. Pie, top, kit. In the diacritic, the superscript H is after a stop. So you can see it here. Pie, top, kit. The aspiration does not occur with these words: spy, stop, kit, skit, pure, tweet, and cute. You actually don't have the aspiration, you don't have the air right afterwards. Pie. If you put your hand in front of your mouth, pie, you can actually feel that air, and that's when you use the diacritic mark H. Voice onset time is the time from the release of a stop closure until the vocal folds start to vibrate for the voicing of a vowel. Stops and voicing. Voice stops can be devoiced word initially and word final or before a voiceless sound. The diacritic for that is ring before devoiced sound. They actually ring. So bad, dig, bead, and ship, you can see that their voicing is a little bit different. You can see where the diacritic marks are going. So, does devoicing always occur? Less likely to be devoiced at the end of a word if followed by a voiced sound. So, dig it or bad boy. Think about the voicing when you're talking about those. Stops and assimilation. The assimilation is the change of one sound into another due to the influence of the neighboring sounds. One sound becomes more like another sound. So velar fronting before high front vowels like E and I in geese versus goose, or K in kit versus cot. The diacritic that you would use plus the velar sound is a little plus mark under the K. So kip. So when you have velar fronting before a high sound, that's where you put the diacritic mark. The assimilation of place with alveolar stops. So if you look at hot plate, you actually don't do the t. You don't release the t. It actually goes right into the p. So hot plate. You just do ha and then plate. So that's an assimilation of sound. It gets taken up by the other sound. Ha plate. Or bad bruise. You don't say the d before you say the b. And so that's the diacritic mark. So if we're going to read this, you actually don't release the stop, read this. We actually just put them all together, read this. And we all know what that means. At 3, I said it with a stop in there. At 3, people know what that means. So you're going to put the t, actually goes into the th, and so you don't have that actually, that sound produced specifically.